I want you to imagine a country and a culture so immersed in Buddhist tradition, they can actually trace their land back to a time when the Lord Buddha himself walked on it. 230 years before Christ, that's 2,230 years ago, this culture was already full of the teachings of Buddha. Thousands of men and women are ordained as monks and nuns. Lay people, they honor the Buddha and they care for the monks. The rulers of the land follow the Buddha's teachings. They order that monasteries be built and children learn about the teachings of the Buddha. In this same place, imagine that before there was even actual writing, before people had figured out how to write and transfer information, monks had committed to memory the teachings of the Buddha in this land. And then when they were able to write in this country, they wrote it down and passed it on to other people. So that even to this day, many of the teachings of the Buddha came from this land, so immersed in Buddhist culture and tradition and teachings. Was there ever a place like this? There was. Any guesses of where it was? Sri Lanka. The country where your family and some of you are from has that amazing heritage. There is no other country that can say that. So imagine for all those years, these people being able to live in a community where they were learning about the Buddha. And then imagine that rulers who are more powerful come into this country. And they take over Sri Lanka. And they don't follow Buddhism. And they send people from their own countries to live in this country, in Sri Lanka. And they send people who follow their religion to go teach the people of Sri Lanka. And they try to stomp out all those years of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. And all of a sudden, if you want a good job, you have to be part of their religion. You can't be Buddhist. If you want your kids to go to a good school, you have to baptize them, not be a Buddhist. If you want to have a decent life and be able to take care of your family, you must follow their beliefs, not yours. That's a hard place to be, isn't it? And many people didn't know what to do. So even though they still believed in Buddha and believed his teachings, to make sure that their children would be okay, they had them baptized and they sent them to the schools. You couldn't even get married to another person unless you were baptized. They had to do it. So over many years, what do you think happened? Did they remember Buddhism? It got lost. Monks who really believed that they should still be teaching the Dhamma, many of them were killed. They were not treated well. And over many years, they lost a lot of what they had in their culture. It was taken from them. That's what happened in Sri Lanka. During this time, when people in Sri Lanka had forgotten how important the Buddhist teachings are, not all of them, but lots, a man from America who didn't know as much about Buddhism as the people in Sri Lanka once did, he came to Sri Lanka because he was interested in Buddhism. And when he got there, he was surprised to see and saddened to see how few people even knew about that heritage that they once had. And he helped the people of Sri Lanka remember the teachings of the Buddha. What was his name? What was this man's name? You should know by now. Henry Olcott. Henry Olcott. When he got there, he lectured the crowds and the people about how good the Buddhist teachings were and how blessed the people are when they follow the Buddhist teachings. He got people in Sri Lanka excited again about being Buddhist, because during that time it wasn't something that you necessarily could be proud of in front of other people. But he helped them to remember how important their culture was, and that it was important to follow the teachings of the Buddha, and that it was okay to say, we deserve to follow our own beliefs. Henry Olcott was also a colonel in the United States Navy and in the Army. And he had some influence over these other rulers from other countries who had come and taken over Sri Lanka. And he spoke on the Sinhalese people's behalf. And he convinced them to give them their freedom back. It wasn't just him, but he was a big part of that. He wrote a Buddhist catechism so that everyone could again start receiving the teachings of the Buddha. He explained what the Buddhist teachings were, and he made sure that every school, every home, eventually had a copy of this, so that families could start learning again about the Dhamma. When he came there, there was only a couple of schools where children could go as Buddhists and learn about their Buddhist faith. He started raising money to make sure that those schools for children could be opened again, so that you didn't have to say that you believed things you didn't believe to go to school. You could be a Buddhist and go to school and learn about Buddhism. And eventually, lay people were allowed to get married by Buddhists, and they could receive an education without having to get baptized. And then they could even celebrate Vesak as a national holiday, which they could not do before. After that, he got together with a couple of other people, and he created a Buddhist flag. The country is now excited again to have Buddhism in the forefront of their culture, and he wanted to make sure they had a flag that they could wave for that. And that is where our Buddhist flag came from. Just a couple weeks ago, our younger kids learned about this flag, and let's see if you can remember, because each color on that flag is a different symbol of Buddhism. Who remembers what this color symbolizes? What is it?
Compassion.
Compassion. When you look at blue, you can think of how compassionate the Buddha is and how we as Buddhists are supposed to be compassionate towards others. What about yellow? What was it? I'm so proud of you guys for remembering these. The middle path, right? What's red? The blessings. When we follow the Buddhist teachings, our lives are going to have blessings. How about white? You can call it out. Purity. The teachings of the Buddha are pure. There's no blemishes in them. There's nothing messed up about them. What about this one? Wisdom. The teachings of the Buddha are wise. And at the bottom of the flag are all those colors again. That's right. Unity. It's a symbol of unity. And that was very important to Henry Olcott, because he thought to make sure that Buddhists have these freedoms and that they can spread these teachings, Buddhists everywhere need to be unified. There weren't just Buddhists in Sri Lanka. They were in Burma, and they were in India, and they were in China, they were in parts of Japan. But all of them practiced a little bit differently. And some of them disagreed about some of the things the Buddha taught. And so they kind of got separated from each other. And Henry Olcott said, if we're going to be able to spread the important messages about the Buddha and his teachings, then we need to focus on what we agree on. So he went to all these different countries and he spoke to the chief monks in these places. And they came up with 14 things that they could all agree on. And we have those even now. They are things like the Four Noble Truths and teachings about the 5 precepts. As a layperson, Henry Olcott helped an entire country remember the rich teachings of Buddhism. And once again, their lives and culture centered around Buddhism. And he is a very big part of the reason that your parents are Buddhist today. Most of you filled out a card before we started, and I asked on it, what is one of your favorite things about coming to the Buddhist Center? And you had lots of different answers. Some of you said, I like learning about the Buddha, I like doing the arts, I like playing with my friends, I like learning about the Sinhalese language, I like having snacks here. If it weren't for the work that Henry Olcott did to make sure that Buddhism wasn't forgotten, there's a very good chance that we would not be here at this Buddhist Center today. You would not be learning Sinhalese, and I would never have known about the Buddha. We owe him a lot of thanks. You guys are lucky. You are young, and you are here, and you get to learn about the teachings of the Buddha and a good path to walk in life. Do you know how old I was when I found out about the Buddha? 27. Do you know how many mistakes and stupid things you do by the time you're 27 if you don't have a good path to follow? You guys got it early. You're lucky. Don't take it for granted. Be thankful. So when you see the flag, next time you can remember not only what the colors represent about the Buddha and his teachings, but that it was Henry Olcott who made it possible for us to even be here now in some ways. We may have not had these monks here to teach us. We owe him a lot of thanks, right? Okay.
Okay, so how would Henry manage to get government or something to agree on giving people their religion?
How did Henry Olcott get the government to agree? Well, he spoke to, I forget what he was called. He spoke to one of the officials who was stationed to oversee Sri Lanka and pleaded on their behalf and eventually convinced them. And I have to tell you, there is a lot about Henry Olcott that I don't know. I didn't know about him until about 6 weeks ago. So I'm learning with you guys. That's why I say you guys are very lucky a lot of times. What I am teaching to you, I've learned 2 weeks before you. And I just now get to start applying to my life. You guys get to do it from the time you're 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. Be thankful for that. Anything else?